Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay and this is On My Scars, a podcast educating you on the everyday life of living with a disability. Now, today I wanted to touch on the subject of jobs. So basically, I wanted to just talk to you about some of the jobs that I've had in my past and my current job. And so let's just jump right in. We're just going to start from the very beginning of my job hunting, I guess, and getting hunting and gathering, if you will. Um, the first job that I had was in April of 2006. So at this point, I was a few months shy of being 22. I didn't have a job prior to this because I didn't need to financially, because I do receive Social Security. But at this point in my life, I wanted a job to get out of the house, to do something productive with myself. And not because I necessarily needed to, because I didn't. I was living with someone. Her name is Wendy. You'll hear her, I'm sure, many times throughout these podcasts. She was a huge part of my life. Still, she's moved away since then, so we don't really see each other as much. But she's still in my life. We still talk to each other on online, and sometimes we text each other and stuff like that. But we're just not, we don't see each other as much as we used to. But we lived together for about 3 years or so. Maybe a little bit less, but it was somewhere in there. But the first job that I ever had was a job that she had too. And so she basically put in a word for me with her boss, and her boss said, okay, well, tell her to go fill out an application. Let me know when she does that. I'll pull the application and then I'll bring her in for an interview. So this was at Walmart, and that's exactly what happened. Her boss brought me in for an interview. I got the job that day. Now, I was put in the fitting rooms answering the phones because that seemed like the easiest thing for me to do based on my capabilities. But then I quickly learned that working in the fitting rooms was not very mentally stimulating for me. I needed to do something that would keep me active. And so I tried various departments. I ended up in sporting goods, which was my favorite department there, which is the reason why I stayed there the longest out of the 4 months that I worked there. But, I worked as a front end cashier for about a week, but then it took me another week to recover because my feet and my legs were just not cut out for standing for long periods of time like that. I just couldn't do it. So I ended up having to move. Now, over the course of me working there, I worked, as I said, in soft lines or the fitting rooms, sporting goods, in the jewelry department, layaway, and as a front end cashier. So there were several different places that they tried to put me in to find out the best fit. And basically, we just discovered that the sporting goods department was the best fit for me. Now, I did have someone else there with me, but my job was to take care of the customers coming up to the counters and wanting to check out things and doing fishing licenses and things like that. And then the other person's job was to restock the shelf and stuff like that. So we each had our own job. I wasn't there by myself, so in case something happened, I had help. And of course, Wendy worked there too. So, she was always in the store if I needed her. And so that was good. And she did a really good job taking care of me for the number of years that we lived together. Now, the next job that I had was from July of 2006 to December of 2006. And so that's about 6 months. And that was at Domino's. And I worked as a CSR, or customer service representative. And basically, I answered the phone, I took the orders. I took in walk-in orders, and I did drive-in orders. Or drive-through, not drive-in. Drive-through orders. And, I did the tendering for those orders as well. So yeah, that was prior to online ordering, which I'm sure that the majority of people use nowadays, as opposed to going to Domino's and ordering there. I don't know why anybody would want to do that, but I'm sure that there are people out there who still do. But now the system has changed, and I'm talking, when I worked there, they had some old school computers. Like, it was one of those computers from like the 90s where it was like very binary, I guess. Like the background was black and like it was, I don't know if any of you have ever played Fallout. It was kind of like the computers on Fallout, the ones you have to hack into. If you haven't heard of those, Google it. You'll see what I'm talking about, but it was very much like that. Like the screen looked exactly like that. And then you had to like put in codes and stuff for like the different ingredients. But I know that they have like touch screen ones now at the Domino's, so it's upgraded since I worked there. But that was like 12 years ago, so I'm not surprised. Um, yeah, basically by December, or actually by October of 2006, I had entered into a relationship. And so by the end of December, we basically had a living arrangement where my ex boyfriend lived with Wendy's boyfriend. They were roommates. So when I started dating my ex boyfriend, instead of living with Brian, who was Wendy's boyfriend, he moved in with me, and then Wendy moved in with him. So it's sort of like Wendy and my ex sort of traded places, and that's basically how we worked it out. So at this point, at the end of December, is when my ex and I moved in together, and I'll have a whole podcast dedicated to the story of that relationship because I think everyone should hear it. I will never say his name, but because it was bad, it ended very badly. But yeah, so that's basically what happened. But by December, my ex had gotten a new job, and it was in another town, whereas the job that at Domino's was in the town that we lived in. But he had gotten another job, and so I couldn't go to work anymore because the times that I would have to go to work, he had to go to work. So I didn't work again until August of 2008. And so it was, about a year and a half or so before I started working again. And that was because he had gotten laid off from the job that he had. And so at this point, financially, I needed to go back to work. And he tried looking for a job, and, it was difficult. So the next job that I had, I worked for AT&T. And I was an internet assistant, which meant that people who called in needing technical support for their internet, I helped them get their internet back up and running, hopefully. Unless we ended up needing to send out a technician or something, but that was what my job was, to try to get the internet back up and running. So I was there from August of 2008 to February of 2009. This was the first job that I had where I had a script to follow, and that I was reviewed by a supervisor and basically critiqued based on, what I did or what I said or things like that. And so the job itself was okay. I got a lot of experience from that job. I don't have any complaints about that job in particular, but this is where I grew my thick skin, because I would be called every name in the book by the subscribers that would call in needing help, because of course they take out their internet being out on the first person who answers the phone. So, and that was me. If, me and my coworkers, obviously, but if I was the first person that they spoke to, I was the first person that they took it out on. And that is the reason why I'm so respectful to people when I call now, because I've been in that position. I know how it is. It's not the individual's fault. It's not even the company's fault most of the time. They don't know what happened. But if I call a company and I'm upset about something, I'm mindful of the fact that it's not the person that you're speaking to's fault. And because the job that I have now, a lot of times things get taken out on people, and it's a lack sometimes of the realization that the person is just doing their job, basically. So I try to be very respectful towards people, and my mom has learned that very valuable lesson as well, to be respectful to people And we can do another podcast, I think, on that at some point about being respectful to people, even if you're angry. Because that's very important to realize that they may be having a bad day, and then, you just make it worse by calling or by receiving a call and cursing them out and doing all that, when you just should realize that they're just doing their job. But that's a whole other subject, so I'm sorry I went off on that. But yeah, so basically, I left AT&T in February of 2009. And the reason for that, I think, was at that point, and this is a very childish reason, and I get that now, and I would not leave a job now unless I had another one lined up. And I wouldn't leave the job that I have now anyway because I like it. But back then, I was just very focused on me as opposed to what was needed. And so I was uncomfortable with how I was being spoken to by the customers. I didn't like it, so I left. That's not how you do things. In the real world, that's not how the world works. In the real world, you suck it up. You do what you have to do. You continue your job regardless of how you're treated until you find something else. If you don't like the job you have, go look for another one, but don't quit the one that you currently have until you get a new one. I know that lesson now, but I didn't know it at the time. So I left in February of 2009. I started at Best Buy in April of 2009, and I was there until July of 2010. Now, and that was like a year and 4-ish months, something like that. So at Best Buy, I was a sales operator. Basically, I answered the phone calls. I used a program that we had on the computers to check the availability of certain items. If people called in and said, hey, do you have this available? Then I can look it up and tell them. Also, if they wanted to hold the item, then I could go get it from the floor and put it at customer service, and they could go pick it up. They could also check out items over the phone and pay for them. That way they would be ready to be picked up and paid for once the person got there to get them from customer service. And then we were also required to complete knowledge tests for all departments in the store. So it was like the electronics department and the home goods department and every department in Best Buy, the sales operators, and there were like 3 or 4 of us, we had to be certified in every single department. As opposed to people who worked in a specific department just had to be certified in their department. We had to take quizzes and pass them with like an 80% in like every department. And I did that, I was told at the time, in the quickest time than anyone ever had. Because I wanted to get them done. And when I got a good score on them, I was proud. They weren't always easy. Don't get that confused. They were not easy. Some of them were very difficult, but I did it and I was proud. So yeah. Now in July of 2010, and again, this is going to be a subject of another podcast episode, but in July of 2010, I moved from where I was living to another place because me and the boyfriend that I had, that I mentioned a few minutes ago, had broken up. And again, that's a subject for a whole other podcast. That breakup. Yeah. So I ended up having to move in with my parents again at this point 26 or almost 26. And I was okay with it at this point because I missed my parents. They weren't living near me at this time. And I know that a lot of 26-year-olds would be like, I don't want to go live with my parents, but my parents are a lot different than most parents. Once I turned 18, my parents were there if I needed them, but they stopped parenting me, which is very important. They stopped, being controlling. Not that parents are controlling, but that's their job, is to guide their children to do the right thing. So they just let me live my life because at this point I was an adult. and it was beyond my control because I can't live by myself. So, I had to do what I had to do. And, but again, that's a subject for another podcast. So I'll stop talking about that now because I just keep bringing it up. Um, so in April of 2011, I met my husband, and he lived very near to where I lived. So we dated for about a year or so, and we ended up moving back into the same house that I lived in when I moved to my parents' house. Because, we just sort of wanted to be on our own, and we could at this point. We had been together for a year. We were ready to, be together. And so we just moved. And much to my parents' dismay, they did not want me to leave. They like having me there. But we moved, and I ended up getting a job in May of 2012, and I was there from May of 2012 to September of 2012. So that's about 5 months. And that job, I'm not going to say where it was at, because that was absolutely 100% the worst job I have ever had in my entire life. That job was very degrading, I guess. It was very shady. The company was very shady. The customer service for the people who are doling out their hard-earned dollars, and a lot of them were actually elderly people who were our customers. The reason that I left the company is, number one, I had another job lined up. But number two, I felt as though these people were scamming these elderly individuals, and that just broke my heart. And unfortunately, I stayed there longer than I actually wanted to because I had to financially. And I didn't like the way that people were treated. I didn't like the way that the customers were treated. The specifications of what my job description was, it was whatever, it was a job, I guess. And there's certain things that you have to do. This was the first job that I've ever had where I had like a goal that I had to complete by the end of a shift. The job that I have now is like that, but it's a little bit more reasonable. It's a lot more reasonable. So that particular job, we would sit in a room with everyone who worked in our department, which is in the call center. We would sit in a room, and they would randomly pick calls out of a list of calls for the previous week. This is every Thursday. And so they would randomly pick calls, and then they would play it for everyone in the room, as opposed to having like a one-on-one manager employee thing. They would play it for everyone in the room, and then your coworkers would critique your call if your call was the one that was picked. Well, there were a few girls there that, for whatever reason, didn't like me. I don't know why. I never spoke to them. I was friendly, but I never had like anything happen that was like a bad thing that they didn't like me for or anything like that. But they would like make fun of the way that I talked for some reason. And so whenever one of my calls was picked, I like cringed because I knew that I was going to get torn apart. And that's exactly what happened every time. And it was just, it hurt. I mean, it hurt my feelings. I had grown to thick skin at this point, but when it's somebody that you see every day and not just some random person that you're talking to on the phone, you have to come in contact with this person every day. And so, when you're trying to be friendly towards this person and they're mean to you, it's bullying, basically. And they never made fun of my disability or anything like that, but they did make fun of the way that I talked, and I couldn't figure out why. But the manager played favorites, so I did go to the manager about it and tell her that I was uncomfortable, but she was friends with the girls that were doing it, and like they would spend time together on their off hours and go to like dinner together, and during our lunch hour they would go to lunch together, so they were really close. So she's like, okay, I'll talk to him, but then of course nothing ever changed. So I got a seasonal job after that, and the seasonal job was from October of 2012 to January of 2013. So during that period of time, I was looking for a more permanent job to start in January so that I would have something once that job ended. Um, and I knew that I would be able to find something because this was the cutoff of me working at a place, like going to work, because I started telecommuting. And I work for a company called the National Telecommuting Institute. And this company hires contractors to work for companies that are looking for employees to work from their home. Each job has a different specification. Each job has requirements that you have to complete. So the first job that I had to have a phone line, and I had to have internet access, which pretty much all telecommuting jobs are going to require you to have internet access, because it's an online thing. You need to be able to communicate with your managers and things like that through email, because that's the only way that you can communicate, except through on the phone, but still. So again, this was a seasonal job. This was for a major retailer, not for any. It's in the certain area. I think it's in like the Midwest or something. I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember, but I know that this particular retailer doesn't exist where I live. They don't have any stores near where I live. So I had never heard it before I started working for them. But basically, I just answered the phones, and again, it was a seasonal position, so I would transfer to the stores and specific departments, or if a person had an availability question for a specific item, I had the database to be able to look it up as long as I knew what store that they were referring to. We did have a script that we had to follow, so I did that as well. I did try to stay on after the January of 2013 cutoff from the seasonal, but I wasn't asked back to continue working there. So, but I did take a test to do that, and I'm not sure exactly what happened. But then at the beginning of January, I got the email saying that my contract would be ending with the company, which meant that I needed another job. But again, I had been looking for one just in case. So this is when I started working outside of my home again, because I didn't have a choice. I had to have a job. Now, I did not find a job right away after my seasonal employment ended, like I thought I would, even though I was looking for like 4 months. But I did end up finding one in March of 2013, and I was only there for, a couple weeks, or maybe like a month at the most. And this is another major retailer that I believe is all over the United States, but again, I'm not going to say what store it is because I had a bad experience. And yeah, so I started working in a specific department. When I was hired, I said, I don't know if I can do that job physically. I was very open about it. They said, okay, we're going to hire you for this particular position. I said, I'm not sure that I can physically do that job. And they said, well, don't worry about that. If you discover that you aren't able to do that job, then we will find something else for you. So I was there for about 3 weeks, I think. I think I was there for like a month at the most, because I believe I got 2 paychecks from there, which meant that I was there for about a month. So I guess the first couple weeks or so, I discovered that I couldn't do it just like I thought. So I went to my supervisors and I said, I was told when I was hired that if I had trouble with this job to come to you and let you know, and that they would find something else for me to do. And at that point, basically, they informed me that they didn't have anything else available, and that without saying the actual words, without actually firing me, they basically insinuated that I either quit or that I would eventually be fired for not being able to do the job that I was hired to do. So I was bamboozled at this point. I did have another job offer from another company in the area. It was like a movie theater or something, but I didn't take it because the hours weren't as good and the pay wasn't as good. But at this particular place, I was going to get a decent amount of hours a week, and I was going to have a more decent pay. And if you have Social Security, you have a cutoff of how much you are allowed to make while you're on Social Security. And so it basically fit in line with what I was allowed to make. And so, you know, I ended up quitting because I didn't want to have a fire on my record. I've never been fired before, still haven't. I've never, I didn't want that. I didn't want to be fired. So I ended up quitting. And it took me a month or so, maybe a little bit under a month. Well, actually, no, I lie. Not lie, but I was mistaken. I think it was at the beginning of April of 2013 that I quit that job at that store, and I got hired on the 26th of April. So it was just a few weeks of 2013 at the job that I currently have, and I've been there for 5 years. So obviously my current job is working out pretty good. Excuse me. So the job that I currently have, again, I'm not going to say the contractor's name, but I did go back to NTI and I applied for another job. And I believe that this was actually the job that I applied for back when I was working before as a telecommuter. But didn't hear back until a little bit later, I think. But I applied for this job when I spoke to my boss, and she was interviewing me on the phone. She said, I want to hire you because of all of your phone experience, because at this point, every job that I ever had involved me answering the phone in some capacity, whether it was recorded and critiqued at some point, or whether it was just casually, hey, thank you for calling such and such, how may I help you? She said that her only hang up and the only thing that she was nervous about was that I didn't have sales experience. But I told her that I'm a quick learner and that I promised that I wouldn't let her down, that I would get the hang of it. And again, I've been there for 5 years. I just made my 5-year anniversary there on April 26th of 2018. So yeah, I've been there and it's going well, and my supervisors are great. They're really nice people, and they're very available if you need to speak with them. And the job itself, it's pretty straightforward. And yeah, it's, this is and I love the hours. I work in the evening, and I'm definitely an evening person, a night person. So that works out too. And, so everything just fell into line with this job. Now, basically, I just want to touch on what NTI actually is for a little bit. I know that I said before that NTI is an organization. It's a nonprofit organization who hires individuals with disabilities. So to be able to get on with NTI and become a contractor, you have to have a disability documented by a doctor. You have to have either a vocational rehabilitation counselor, or you have to have Social Security and, again, documentation from a doctor stating that you are in fact disabled. Which, if you have a vocational rehabilitation counselor, VR actually sends you to a doctor so that they can certify your disability. So there you go. You have the documentation for that. If you get Social Security, you also have to have documentation from a doctor stating that you have a disability. So either way, you have that documentation. Basically, you can go to the website, which I will link in the description. You go to the website, you do have to take courses, and it's just general customer service, sort of like classes that you have to take. You have to pass them with some sort of efficiency. You have to take a typing test because you have to be able to type a certain number of words a minute. Um, and once you finish your courses with NTI, you get a counselor, or at least I did at the time, where they send you recommendations for jobs and say, hey, this job is available. If you're interested, get back to me. We can go ahead and apply it, or, go ahead and apply for it. They go through the process with you. So you're not on your own. You know what's going on. It's not like a traditional job where you apply for a job, you get an interview, and then you never hear back again. With NTI, they send you a letter saying, you weren't accepted for this job or whatever. So you never are left hanging. You know what's going on. There was one job that I did apply for, and I think that it was during the time after the January 2013, when it was a seasonal job, and I was looking for another one as, a backup in case that one didn't go forward after January. And I went to the, the little introduction orientation thing, and then I wasn't selected to be a contractor for that company. But so that does happen sometimes. You have to have the right specifications, all of that. So yeah, I'm very happy where I'm at now. Again, I'll link NTI in the description so that you can go check it out if you're disabled and you're looking for a job. Again, some jobs require that you get certain things. Some jobs require that you use your own computer. My particular job only requires that you have an internet access, that you have like a headset and an external USB mouse, things like that. And then they provide the laptop that you use. So all of the jobs from NTI are going to require that you at least have internet access and obviously electricity. But that's a given, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, and then some of them just have additional requirements. But my job just required that I had the internet, it has to be a certain speed because you're using voice over internet protocol, which is VoIP, I think is how it's pronounced, to make calls to people. So you have to have a decent connection to get through to people. Yeah, so that's basically it. If you're interested in knowing more about my particular job, just the specifics of what I do, please contact me. You can contact me on Twitter. You can contact me on Tumblr. I'm on Twitter at Oh My Scars Pod and on Facebook at Oh My Scars. Drop me a message. You can send me a private message. You can send me a public message, anything. If you have any questions about NTI or about my job in particular, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm an open book, and I want to be here for you. I want to answer these questions for you because that's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this to help you. So if there's a disabled individual out there who is looking for a job and you're not able to commute, you're not able to drive, or you're not able to stand for long periods of time at a traditional job, and you can't find a job that doesn't require you to do those things, I highly recommend NTI. Be wary of companies that ask for money. My job, NTI has never asked me to pay anything out of pocket for their services. It's all nonprofit. And I've always been paid on time and the correct amounts, and I've never, ever, ever once had an issue. They're very easy to talk to. They're very friendly. They're very, very easy to get in touch with if you have any questions. I've never had to contact them because they're so transparent with everything. So, and I'm not being asked to say any of these things. I truly, truly believe that NTI has saved me in so many ways. And they saved me because I'm able to work now regardless of how, transportation is an issue for me. I'm able to contribute to society, which is something that I want to be able to do. I'm able to contribute to society but not put anyone else out. I don't have to worry about getting other people's schedules mixed up because I can't drive. So it's just a really great thing. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you go check it out and go through the training process. And then hopefully you can get into a great job too. My company is always hiring. So again, if you want to know more about that, go through the training with NTI and then contact me and I'll put in a good word for you. We can talk to make sure that the job that I do is something that you would be interested in, because that's very important. You have to be motivated. You have to be driven. You have to be responsible. You have to be on time. I handle credit card numbers on a nightly basis, so that's important. You have to be trustworthy. You have to sign contracts saying that you're not going to share any of the information about the people that you speak to with anyone. So you do have to have a responsibility. You have to get to work on time. That's another misconception that a lot of people have, saying, oh, well, you work from home, it's so easy. Yes, I do work from home, and in a lot of ways it is easier. But I do have a schedule. I work from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday. I'm not able to do anything else during those hours, regardless of the fact that I work at home. So that is a very common misconception about working from home. People think that I don't have any rules because I work from home and that it's just a lot easier. My calls are recorded. I am reviewed just like people who have other jobs outside of their home. I can't have any background noise, so that means that Fiona can't be in the room with me while I'm working in case she hears something and starts barking. So there's just a number of things that, and another thing that comes to mind with the responsibility of my job is that normally if you work at a place like a building where they provide the internet, they provide the computers, they provide the headsets and the electricity and all of that, that's all my responsibility. So if my headset goes out and I'm not able to work, I don't get paid for that because it's my responsibility. If the computer dies, that's not really my responsibility because it's a company laptop. But in some of the contracts that you might have, if you work for NTI and you use your own PC, you might be responsible for that if it goes out. If your computer dies and you're not able to work, it's on you. But with my job, they provide the laptop. So if something happens with the laptop, it's not on me. But if my internet goes out and I'm not able to work, that's on me. I don't get paid for that time that I'm not working. If my electricity goes out, same thing. I don't get paid for it. So that's, I still have responsibilities that I have to abide by. So there just are a lot of misconceptions about people who work from home thinking that they can do whatever they want anytime they want. But no, I talk on the phone with people and I need to be professional and I need to have a friendly tone in my voice and, just all of these things. So just keep that in mind as well. If you don't think that that's something that you're good at, it's understandable. It's not for everyone. That's what my boss says all the time. It's not for everyone. She recognizes that. I've recommended a couple people before and it didn't work out because those people discovered that the job just wasn't for them. And that's understandable. But I do recommend that you at least check it out. So that's all I have to say today. Again, I want to repeat how you can contact me on Twitter and Tumblr at Oh My Scars Pod and on Facebook at Oh My Scars. As I said before, I'm here to talk to whenever you need me. So that's it. I will see you all next time and I hope you have an awesome day. Bye everyone.